One slow reader, one epic story, 1,211 pages. This is my spoiler-free review of The Stand by Stephen King. Hiya everyone, I hope you're doing well and that you've had a good week. My name's Charlene and this is my little YouTube channel where I talk mainly about books, but also with a little bit of travel and lifestyle as well. And in today's video, as I briefly just mentioned, I'm going to be giving you a spoiler-free review of The Stand by Stephen King. I've got so much that I want to say about this book, so if you're interested in it, I'm going to be giving you a spoiler-free overview of the plot. I'm going to be touching on the characters and the themes in this book. I'm going to be talking about the length of this book and how I got on as a slow reader reading that many pages, telling you how long it took me, all of that good stuff. So if you've ever wondered about The Stand by Stephen King, then please keep watching. So before I jump into my thoughts and feelings and giving you an overview of the book and all that, I thought I'd give you a couple of details quickly, starting with the Goodreads average rating. So the average rating for The Stand on Goodreads is 4.35 stars, which is pretty high. It's got tens of thousands of reviews and hundreds of thousands of ratings as well. So it's a very, very well reviewed book. And I also wanted to give you a little bit of the blurb. So first came the virus, and then came the dreams. A man escapes from a biological testing facility, unknowingly carrying a deadly weapon, a mutated strain of superflu that will wipe out over 99% of the world's population within a few weeks. Those who remain are scared, bewildered, and in need of a leader. To emerge, Mother Abigail, the benevolent 108-year-old woman who urges them to build a peaceful community in Boulder, Colorado, and Randall Flagg, the Dark Man, the apostate of death, the warlord of Charnel House and Prince of Evil. Now the survivors must choose between them and ultimately decide the fate of all humanity. So let me just start by saying that I've wanted to read The Stand by Stephen King for some time, but always, whenever I come to read it, the one thing that stands in my way, particularly as a slow reader, is the length of the book. Because I've read books I thought were long before, but I've never read a book this long. This is now officially the longest book I've ever read. It is 1,211 pages long, and it is one chunky, awkward, heavy bulk of a book. So if you're even contemplating reading this, I would say if you have the option to read it on Kindle, then go ahead and do that. For some reason, my husband has a Kindle, but I decided, no, that's not for me. I'm going to make it super awkward for myself. And so I just read this the whole time. And I was carrying this around everywhere with me, trying to get in a little bit of reading whenever I had the chance. I literally lived with this book for so long. So how long did it take me to read it as a slow reader? I read this all day, all night. When I was working, I was listening to it when I could on Audible. I took it with me everywhere. So on my lunch break, if I had like 10 minutes spare, I'd be reading it. What I'm trying to say to you is that I really doubled down on this book. What I didn't want to happen was, for what sometimes happens to me when I'm reading a long book, is that I get so lost in how long the book is or lost in the detail of the book that I stress myself out and overwhelm myself and think, do you know what, I just can't read it. It's going to take me years. I just can't do it, and give up reading it. And I was sure that that wasn't going to happen with this because I was so wanting to read it. I'd been wanting to read it for so long. I also see in so many people's videos that I watch, their top 5 books, top 10 books, whatever it is, this is always number 1 or near to there. So I knew it would be worth it in the end. It's just, could I deal with the length of the book as a slow reader? So having said all that, all in all, with doubling down, reading as much as I humanly could at every single hour of the day, staying up late to read it, waking up first thing in the morning to read it, listening to it on Audible, all times of the day. In total, it took me 6 weeks to read The Stand by Stephen King. And you know what? I'm actually really happy with that. I am a slow reader, as I always talk about, and I had the kind of feeling that this would take me at least like 3 months to read, in all honesty, because breaking down like the length of the book and the chapters and the pages and all of that, I was like, there's no way that I'm going to get through this like in less than 3 months. And I really didn't want that to be the case, because obviously it doesn't matter how long you take to read a book, but I just didn't want it to get to that phase like I was just talking about, where I suddenly get overwhelmed and think, oh my God, I can't read this book anymore. So I really didn't want it to take too long. So I'm so happy that it took me 6 weeks to read this, and a testament to what the book is like as well. It has just absolutely started hammering it down, and I am here for it. Like, that is the most cozy situation I could have wished for. So if you hear that in the background, that's what's going on. But oh my God, it looks so good. I feel like I'm in Twilight. I love it. Anyway, if you're new here, you won't know, or if you've watched any of my other videos, you will know that I've only fairly recently started reading Stephen King books. I've always been a little bit intimidated by them, because like, everything you hear about Stephen King is horror, horror, horror. And I only just started reading Stephen King at the end of last year, and majority of those books that I've read, I think I've only read 1 or 2 of them that are actually horrors. Everything else have been like epics and just general fiction. So I was very much looking forward to reading The Stand, because I know by now that I love Stephen King's writing. I'm 7 Stephen King books in, and by no means does that make me an expert, but I know that I enjoy his writing. I find it so incredibly immersive and detailed that it makes me feel like I'm living in the story whenever I pick up a Stephen King book. There is absolutely no part of my brain that can't imagine everything, and I listen to it on Audible as well, which that kind of like immersiveness really, really helps me. So that is exactly what I did for this book. I have picked up this massive gigantic copy, but I also have it downloaded on Audible, and if you're even considering reading this book, like, that is a must. That I would never have gotten through this book if I hadn't have done that, so I would 100% recommend that. But let me now get on to telling you a little bit more about the plot. So as always, I want to give you enough information about this book so that you can find out whether or not you want to read it and see if you find it interesting and you want to pick it up for yourself. But I also don't want to give you so much information that you find it full of spoilers and that you're like, oh, I don't need to read it now because she's told me everything that happens. So I'm going to very carefully go over the plot. I'm going to use the blurb, I think, because I don't want to tell you too much more than what's on the blurb. But it says, first came the virus and then came the dreams. So I can talk about how the book starts. So basically, our first chapter, we are presented with a man who is fleeing a testing facility. We don't know what kind of facility it is, what they're testing, what's happening here, who the man is, nothing. All we know is there's some kind of emergency situation, and he has managed to get out of this building and be the only person to get out of this building before the shutters come slamming down, and there are alarms going off and red lights flashing, and we know that something bad is happening. As the blurb suggests there, what we see then is him fleeing, taking his wife and child and trying to kind of flee across the country, across America, to get away from everything that's happening and try and outrun what he knows is happening, which we will then find out is there's some kind of epidemic, some pandemic. So basically it's like a COVID situation. But this is called the super flu, or what they refer to in this book, they nickname it Captain Trips. So basically it's really, really interesting because it starts with this super flu. And we watch what happens as very, very slowly, very gradually, without too much alarm, and with the government trying to keep everything a secret and under wraps, we watch what happens as this pandemic, as this super flu virus gets spread from one person to the next, till we're at the point where 99% of the population has died. And the thing about this book is that that's not all it is. Like, if that was all it is, that could still be an amazing, epic novel in itself. But that is just one tiny part of it. That is what gets the wheels in motion and gets this book and this story on its way. So it all starts with this super flu, but then it leads into so much more than that. It leads into a story of what happens during the super flu, what happens after the super flu, and how people try and rebuild their lives after the super flu. But it's also about all of the different characters within this story, of which there are many, which I will touch on in a minute. But it tells us how those people rebuild their lives. If during COVID it had got even worse and the whole world had effectively ended, those of you that were left surviving, how would you rebuild your lives? How would you move on without your loved ones? How would you get on in a world that has got no electricity, that, you know, you don't know one person from the next? You maybe don't see somebody for weeks on end. That is a very, very rough overview of what happens in the beginning part of the book. But it's not just about this pandemic and the super flu, which, like I said, is in and of itself an incredibly interesting, fascinating novel. We also are then led into a story, as it suggests in the blurb as well, of basically a tale, a battle of good and evil. So after the super flu, after everything's happened and there are just some 1% surviving people left, we have Mother Abigail, the benevolent 108-year-old woman who urges them to build a peaceful community in Boulder, Colorado, and Randall Flagg, who is basically the complete opposite of everything that Mother Abigail is. I see this very much as a tale of good and evil, light and dark. It's almost biblical, like God and the devil. And I can't tell you too much more about that section of the book, but that is what's led on from everything happening with the super flu. So this book has 3 parts. It has 3 books within it, and also it has 2 major storylines. So it's kind of like reading 2 novels in one, but those storylines weave perfectly into each other and lead on perfectly from one another. One of the main things I was thinking when I was reading this book was how scary this would have been to read this during COVID, because obviously it was written way before COVID ever happened, and actually it is so scarily accurate to how COVID started, what was happening, what the governments were saying, how it spread, how we're being told one thing then another, the news broadcasts, all of that. It's scarily accurate to what happened during COVID, and for that reason alone, I would say this book is so ahead of its time. But I always thought the whole time reading it, like, if I was reading it during COVID, I would have been even more scared than I already was, because this was like what happened in COVID, and then it builds and builds and builds to a place where it just luckily never got to with COVID, but to a place where it's like 99% of the population has died and the world has effectively ended. So the whole way through reading it, that's all I could think about was those poor people that have randomly picked this up during COVID and that they're reading this. They must be so scared. It's now started thundering as well, so it's all got very, very dramatic here. I've got one scared dog and cat that I'm trying to look after at the same time as doing this video, but I don't know what's happened to the weather. All of a sudden it's just gone absolutely crazy. But anyway, let me carry on telling you about this book. I don't know how much more I can tell you about the story without giving too much away, but I really just want to emphasize on, because I realized up until now I've spoken a lot about the pandemic super flu kind of portion of the book, and that is so important. That element of it is the whole reason that everything else happens in the book. But I really just want to express as well how powerful and important the good versus evil element of the book is. It is, like I said, it's like yin and yang, light and dark, good and evil, God and the devil. It's like that kind of like that age-old theme of good versus evil. And what's left after the super flu, the people that are left in the world, there are no more grey areas. Basically, you will either fall on the side of good or evil, because you've got 2 choices to make. Well, actually, no, you don't. You have 3 choices to make. You can try and survive on your own, or you can go to one of these 2 communities. You can go to a community in what is it called? Boulder, Colorado, led by Mother Abigail, which people are seeing in their dreams, and they're seeing this lovely, warm, light, happy, good, spiritual and religious community. Or you can go to the other community, which is run by Randall Flagg, who is known as all sorts of things, including the Dark Man, the Walking Dude, all sorts of different things, who people are also seeing in their dreams, but they're seeing him in a demonic, dark, red-eyed, evil-voiced, kind of infiltrating your worst ideas and thoughts. You can go to that community if you want to, in Las Vegas. So it's very much like this tale of good and evil, and everybody that's left after the super flu has that choice to make. Basically, are you going to fall on the side of good, or are you going to fall on the side of evil? What do you have to stand for yourself? And I think that's the whole reason it's called The Stand as well, because it builds to a stand. It comes to this head of good versus evil. I do just want to touch on the characters of this book as well, and I couldn't sit here and talk you through every single character within this book, because it's 1211 pages. We meet quite a few characters along the way, and that is always something that is a bit of a red flag for me when I'm reading a book, because I think I'm never going to keep track of all of these different characters and who is what and what their relationship is to somebody else and what they've done, what they've said. And I started to get a little bit at points overwhelmed by the amount of characters, worrying that I wouldn't remember who is who and who was important and all of that. But please let me just say right now that that absolutely doesn't matter. This book spans a very long time period, and through an pandemic and through the world effectively ending, and then what happens afterwards. So you're going to meet a lot of characters along the way. In my opinion, those characters are not all there for you to remember every single thing that everyone does and every single character you meet along the way. It's just trying to build this world, and it just makes it so much more kind of like realistic and complete. There are so many characters you meet along the way. There are, of course, more main characters and more central characters than others, which I will touch on. But I just wanted to say that because sometimes I find it hard to read a book where there are a lot of characters. And if you're like that, absolutely don't let that worry you at all, because there is absolutely no need to remember every single one. And in fact, it just helped the story move along more. One thing I will say is that when I read a lot of books, it's usually the plot or the story that I remember and not necessarily the characters. Like if somebody were to ask me like, oh, what's your favourite character from a book? I think I could only pick out 1, 2, maybe 3, but I met maybe 4 of my favourite characters in this book. So I don't know if you just saw that. That was lightning now. Oh my god, it's going crazy. Anyway, the character development in this book is absolutely outstanding. I'm not usually a person that is drawn that much to characters. It's usually the story itself that interests me. Some thunder there. But the characters in this book, I fell in love with, okay? And when I say that the character development is outstanding, like I know these people inside out. I know every quirk to their personality. I know every flaw to their personality. And what I love about the characters as well is that they're not completely black and white and straightforward. There are grey areas. They're not necessarily just good and bad. There are so many complexities and human emotions and different parts of their personality, different traits and stuff that makes them so much more complex than they're just good or they're just evil. It really explores like the human psyche and like just the build up of our personalities. And I can't tell you enough about the characters in this book, other than the fact, like I just said, that I completely fell in love with some of them. A lot of the themes throughout the book are explored through the characters and through what they represent themselves. And what I found super interesting was that a lot of the characters, while they were like multi-leveled and complex, and they were not just like good or bad or whatever, a lot of them represent different emotions or different types of people. That was the way I saw it anyway. So there is one of the characters in this book that I'm not going to tell you exactly who it is, but one of the characters in this book is very philosophical and is very deep and very thoughtful, and was a professor before this all started. And he explores and communicates so many of these kind of like deeply religious ideas and like these themes that are obviously taken from like philosophy and from religion and things like that. And he explains them to a lot of the other characters in this book, like, you know, maybe he'll be explaining it in the terms of like Mother Abigail versus Randall Flagg or something like that. But because that character is there, we get to see a really good insight into some of where Stephen King's ideas come from this book. And we get to really explore and understand those themes of like religion and philosophy and psychology and things like that. And so what I'm trying to say in a really bad way is that I think a lot of the characters are there not only just for the story and so you can follow them as characters, but also to explain some of these more complex ideas and themes to us along the way as we go as well. Some of the characters we only meet for a short time, some of the characters we meet for a long time, and some of them even the entire way through the story. So one of the elements that I found most interesting was to see how the characters developed throughout this catastrophe that's happened, how their personalities have changed, how they've dealt with this catastrophe, and how actually a lot of the time the catastrophe has brought to life some of their most important traits. I found that really, really interesting, and I absolutely love how a lot of the characters' storylines are entwined. So for example, there's one storyline where some characters are moving from one area in America to another to try and hopefully get to a certain facility that they think will be safer. And then along the way, some other characters are traveling through the country, and then they find some of the things that those characters have left. And so a lot of the time these characters' stories entwine. Some of the characters meet up along the way. Some of the groups meet up and end up in the same place. Some of them end up in different places. It's just really, really fascinating to see who goes where, who meets up along the way, what they think of each other, and to watch the characters develop. Like, I know I'm really like going on and on about the characters in this book, but I haven't read, I don't think ever, another book where I have felt so drawn to the characters, where I've understood them so clearly, and where I thought that they are so beautifully written to illustrate certain points and themes very, very perfectly throughout the book. And just to close off my little blabbering section about the characters, I just wanted to touch on some of my favourite characters within the book. I'm not going to expand on their characters or anything like that. I'm just telling you so that if you have read it, you can let me know, do you love these characters as well? Or you can watch out for these characters if you're going to read The Stand. So some of my favourite characters are Franny Goldsmith, who is a young character who finds herself pregnant throughout the pandemic. We've got Nick Andros. So Nick Andros is a really, really interesting character. He is deaf and mute, so his struggles throughout this catastrophe are really, really interesting. And it's so interesting to see the way that he survives and communicates, and how he lasts, and how, you know, everything that happens to him throughout the pandemic. So that was Nick Andros. Tom Cullen might be my favourite character that I've ever met in a book, ever. I completely fell in love with the character of Tom Cullen. At what points throughout the book I cried, it was because of Tom Cullen, okay? I just loved him so much. He is portrayed as a kind of like more simple-minded, kind of country folk kind of person. But he's so much more than that. There is so much more to him. He is so incredibly vulnerable and lovable and intelligent in ways that you wouldn't expect him to be. And he is just an absolute hero. I loved Tom Cullen to bits, and I love the way he speaks. And this will make no sense to you if you haven't already read the book, but I just cannot keep saying M-O-O-N, that spells whatever, because that's what he says all the time. And so around the house, my husband's like, what do you want for dinner? I'm like, M-O-O-N, that spells dinner. I can't stop quoting Tom Cullen, so he is an absolute hero. I love him. Kojak, I'm not even going to touch on or go into Kojak because I don't want to give anything away, but oh my God, I love Kojak. And also one of my other favourite characters was Stu Redman, who is just your everyman. He is like a pretty normal guy. He's pretty good at like thinking his way through things and stuff. It's just your average normal guy that is trying to survive throughout this pandemic and trying to do the best he can by the people around him and trying to make the most logistical sense of what the hell is happening here. But those were some of my favourite characters anyway. I'll stop going on about the characters now, but please let me know, do you love any of those characters? Who are your favourite characters? And more importantly, do you also love Tom Cullen? So now I'll start talking about some of the themes of this book. I think obviously if you look at it on a surface level, the main themes you've got are post-apocalyptic. So there's a massive catastrophe. This pandemic that happens, this super flu virus wipes out 99% of the population, only 1% of the population left to survive in a country, in a world, in fact, that is effectively dead on its feet. So it's just really, really interesting to see what happens throughout this apocalyptic situation and how you live before, through and after that. So that's one of them. I would say another one would be there's very much a theme of like greater good, and I think this falls into the kind of religious area of it as well. But it's like in this kind of world, it's not enough to do what you think is right just for yourself. You have to do what you think is right for the greater good. And a lot of characters in this book make some massive sacrifices because they are aware there is something much bigger at play. So that's a very important one, I would say. But one of the most interesting components of it to me was this whole good versus evil thing, this light versus dark, God versus the devil kind of, you can look at it in any way you want, but it is that kind of battle of good versus evil. And I found that such an important and interesting theme, and it clearly takes a lot of its kind of roots from religion. So I found that super, super interesting. There is a lot of spirituality and religion in this, and there is a lot of ideas from all different kind of other cultures and things like that as well. So I found that part super, super interesting. But it's also just about humans, human survival, and you know, what makes you human, what makes you good, what makes you not good, like the complexities of our human emotions and characters and personalities. And I'm talking too much because I'm getting out of breath, but there are so many important, interesting themes to this book, and I absolutely loved exploring all of it. It was so multi-leveled. It was absolutely not a story that you read start to finish, and that's one story. There's almost two massive stories happening at the same time, let alone all those different themes and characters and emotions and all of those other things happening at the same time as well. So now to get around to my thoughts about the book, and I think you can tell by the way that I'm talking about it that I absolutely loved it. When I was reading it, as I've already told you, my initial concern was that I was going to read it and be like, oh my God, I'm only 100 pages in. I've still got 1,100 to go. But honestly, hand on heart, at no point did I feel like that. From the second I started reading it, I was so in. And also because I listened to it on Audible, that made a massive difference as well. But along the way, I didn't care. I didn't care if I was only like 30 pages in. I didn't care if I was only like 250 pages in and I still had all those pages ahead of me, because I was so in and I was so invested in the story that I wanted to be there. I wanted to be completely immersed in it and absorbed by it, and I didn't want it to end. I wanted to see it through, and I was genuinely so interested in it. It held my attention the entire way through. I never worried about the length of the book at all. So I completely loved it. I loved reading it. I loved listening to it. As always with Stephen King books, whenever I'm reading a Stephen King book, because they are quite lengthy, I tend to download the Audible version as well, so I can listen to it sometimes together, sometimes separate, but it just helps me get through the story. And I always find that, especially, I don't know what it is with the Stephen King books, the narrators or whatever, but it gets me in even more. Like, I'm living in this world, and I completely felt that way reading this book. From the second I started reading it until the end, I was interested, I was absorbed, I wasn't bored, I didn't care about how far I was into it. I loved absolutely every single second of it. As I've already said as well, this is one of the only books where I've really, truly connected with and fallen in love with some of the characters. And I found every single theme and everything that happened throughout the book so, so interesting, especially because we've all lived through COVID. I think especially after seeing that for myself and seeing what happened to the world and how easily it all fell apart, it makes it so much more believable and realistic, and it drives it home even more. So I've really found all of that so, so interesting. You will not be surprised at all to hear that I scored this. Actually, you might be surprised, because usually I'm like 5 out of 5 if I loved it. This is my first ever 6-star book. So I scored The Stand by Stephen King 6 out of 5 stars, which means that it's had to battle with The Secret History, and I still haven't completely decided which goes in first place and which goes in second, or if they're joint first. But this will either be in first, joint first, or second position for my favourite book of all time, along with The Secret History. I think it might be first, but I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that a little bit more and come back to you on that. But all you need to know is that I love this book. It is one of my favourite, if not my favourite book of all time. And I rated it as 6 out of 5 stars, and I can't recommend it enough. So the last thing I want to say in my long rambling video about this book is that if you're at all interested in it, but you're worried about the size, the length of the book, how long it might take you, any of that, if you've got any concerns whatsoever, but there's even an inkling of interest in this book, please pick it up and give it a go. I can't recommend it enough, and you absolutely won't regret it. This is, like I just said, probably the best book I've ever read. It is stayed with me. I know I'm going to keep it downloaded on Audible on my phone just so I can dip in and out if I feel like it, because I already miss these characters and this world and this story. This is the greatest story, this greatest epic I think I've ever read. When I finished it, I cried because some parts of it were emotional, but also because it was over, and I don't do that very often, and I can't tell you enough how much I loved it. I'm going to stop blathering on about it now, but if you've read this book, please let me know in the comments, spoiler free, what did you think? Did you love it as much as me? Did you have any other thoughts? Any other characters that you loved? Are you thinking about picking it up and reading it now that you've watched this video? Are you just don't want to deal with it, it's too long? Please, I'll be so interested. Just let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I would be so happy if you would like my little video, and I would love you even more if you would give my channel a little subscribe. That would be absolutely amazing. And I just want to finish off by saying once more, read this book. You won't regret it. It's absolutely incredible. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time in my next video. Thank you. Bye.